Okay, go. No politics.
No, maybe I'm
Sorry.
joking.
Okay, so Unit 1.7, as the name implies, is about federal and unitary systems, the distinctions, and how it applies to our course countries. So, what is a federal system? It's when fewer being significant powers are given legally by a constitution to sub-national governments. So, that transition's weird, but anywho, just because there are regional governments doesn't mean that they necessarily have significant power. That's a distinction to make. Like, for example, it's not like a local government, but like the Queen of England doesn't have any power. So like, just because she exists and just because she has a cool fancy title does not mean that she has those powers. And for that reason, the United Kingdom is not a federal system, as you're about to see. And the other big thing is legally. So like, just because it's how a system appears doesn't mean that's how the system is set up legally. So the examples are not right here. So the pros are participation at multiple levels. So a citizen can vote in federal elections for like the president or like members in a representative body like Congress in the United States. Or they can vote for like local officials like their governor, their mayor, like state representatives, all that kind of thing. So, and then local governments can respond to local needs. So like, if I live in a country or if I live in a county where corn is a really big product, then the local government might pass laws to help me make more money off my corn. But like at the but like a federal government wouldn't necessarily be the ones wanting to make it so you make more money off of corn because it's unfair to rice farmers, for example.
So,
Anywho,
who is a federal system?
I love corn. We're getting there.
Okay.
And then I abbreviated one party rule as OPR a lot in this. You'll soon learn. So a federal system is less subject to OPR, one party rule, because there are multiple levels of government that need to be taken over before the one party can really rule. So the examples are Mexico, Nigeria, and Russia. What the hell is going on? Is someone getting shot out there?
You can't say that!
Is Luigi, what's his face out there?
Your NYU college advisor's gonna
Stop,
look
when
at
you
these
brought
videos.
Stop, Will, when you brought that up, I started giggling.
Okay. We'll
United
talk
Health?
about that after the video. Okay, and then the cons are that federal governments can be slow and inefficient because there's multiple levels that all have to be like working together, and that never happens, as you, the viewer, are probably well aware. They can be really complicated and hard for citizens to understand, so they don't really know what they're participating in, as you, the viewer, are probably aware. And they can cause conflict between levels of government when, the local government says one thing, the state government says one thing, and the federal government says one thing, and nobody agrees, and that is why they're slow and inefficient, as you, the viewer, are probably aware. You know. The United States is a federal system, in case you can't tell, so that may help you on your AP test.
Don't write about it on the AP test. You cannot mention the
Unitary
United
systems.
States.
Nobody knows what the United States of
Unitary
America is.
systems.
Way go fingers.
So a unitary system is when all significant political power is vested in the national government according to the Constitution or whatever you want to call
so that's 3 of our 6 countries.
Yeah, it's split right down the middle.
Wow. Think of that on your AP exam.
Yeah, I'm just gonna think of Will just like diving.
Okay, so the examples are UK, contrary, which you're not going to think of on the AP exam. You're going to be there and be like, whoa, the UK is like democratic and cool and developed and all that. Of course, it's a federal system, which is a misconception. Okay, just because a country like is democratic and all that, just because they have a democratic regime does not mean they're a federal system. And just because the system has just because a country has an authoritarian regime does not mean it's a federal system, which is why Russia was on the other slide.
So true.
Yeah, remember that. Okay, you heard it here first.
Regime does not equal
the pros,
system.
Regima.
Pros.
So the pros of a unitary system is that like laws are consistent. It's basically all the cons of a federal system. They're really easy to understand because there's only one level of participation, and the government can act quickly because there's not a bunch of moving parts. The cons are the pros of a federal system. It ignores regional problems because it's a federal government, so it can't pay attention to every region's needs. It's more subject to one-party rule because you only have to take over the federal government. There's nothing else you have to worry about. And the regional government has little power. I don't really know why that's a con because it's literally the definition, but that's what the lady who did my AP daily video said.
This is so.
Oh my god.
This is so relevant to mine because mine had
Mm-hmm.
Iran and China as.
It's almost like that's why
Kinda
they're
like
like
that's
right
the
after each
point.
other.
It's almost like they're all connected.
Watch, mine will tie it all together. Broken, your brain's gonna explode.
Your brain's gonna
way.
explode. Wait, that
These
sounds
are-
like what happened in New York 2 weeks ago.
These are
I'm
slowly
gonna make a
getting more
TikTok
and more
about that.
out of
I'm gonna make a
pocket.
TikTok about that. Okay, so there are several factors that can change the relationship between local and federal levels that help a system move between federal and unitary. So the first big factor is cleavage. As stated by the video, is cleavage. So not this kind of cleavage. Just think of me doing this in an
They
AP
can't
test.
see you.
I have no
They
cleavage.
can't see you.
I have no cleavage, so it does not apply to AP Kogo. Cleavage, which is like, you know, in 6th grade, how you learn like cleavage
It's
is
a
how
rock?
a rock breaks.
Yeah.
It's how a country breaks.
Oh!
Oh!
Cross curriculum.
Yeah. So cleavage is differences between different groups within a country. So it's usually ethnic, religious, or political. So cleavage can cause change in 2 ways. So either there will be more power in a local government to address local issues. So like different cleavage groups want different things, and so they'll give. And usually groups live in like the same area usually, and so they'll so more power will be given to local governments to deal with their cleavage.
Deanna's gonna
But sometimes the federal government, and this is usually
There's too much cleavage.
we're getting overwhelmed by the cleavage. Sometimes
Cleavage consumption.
a federal government has to come in because maybe the groups live all across the country and they're not consistently like grouped, or sometimes it's just because there's a dictator who thinks he can do whatever the hell he wants, and you know legally he
Clocked.
can. So there will be more power in the federal government who thinks that the cleavage is bad and that the cleavage should not
it's good.
exist. No, the
No,
cleavage
the
is
cleavage
bad. So they'll put more power on the federal government to just get rid of the cleavage. Because cleavage results in violence, usually. Cleavage results in violence between different groups. And so at the federal level, sometimes they'll just be like, they'll treat the symptoms, not the cause. They'll have more power to deal with violence, but they won't do anything about the cleavage.
Would you say the Civil War was 2 cleavage groups?
It was too much cleavage. Too much cleavage.
Oh!
So the next factor
what's
is
that?
the national 9/11.
What country did that happen in?
Okay.
That's not our course country.
That
Okay,
is
so
not.
you can't use 9/11 on the AP test. 9/11. Okay, but it's a good example of a threat. It's also a good example of the next slide, but we're getting to that. So threats to national security require intervention from the government, and this doesn't really result in the local governments getting more power, but it does result in the federal government getting more power because it makes it easier to address the threat on a united front, and the federal government, by nature, has like more power. Like when it's more powerful when it has the same amount of power. And you might be wondering, well, that doesn't make any sense, but it does. So like if the 50 states of the United States,
Stop saying
if the
that.
4 regions of the United Kingdom
Don't.
all had the
Like that
same
one.
powers and they were trying to attack, like deal with something on a united front, it wouldn't work because there are four different regions and they wouldn't all agree on how to deal with things. But if it's just the federal government making decisions and they have the same powers, then the federal government is able, it's only one person making a decision. So it's just easier, and yeah. So the third one is a threat. Or it's not a threat, it's a terrorism, which is basically a threat. So, you know, it's terrorism.
I
But
can't see you.
the Kogo application here is the terrorist group Boko Haram in Nigeria, and they're not blowing up the Twin Towers, unfortunately.
Don't say that.
Okay, that's
okay.
But
God.
so Boko Haram exists in the northeastern part of Nigeria, and most of the tension Boko Haram causes is only in northeastern Nigeria. So terrorism can result usually in more power to federal governments because it's for the same reasons as a threat, but it's also because when terrorism is only existing in like one region, it makes it harder for that terrorist group to take over the whole country because there's more power in the federal government and they don't have control over the whole country yet. They only have control here, and if there's more power here, it's easier for them to take over because they have power there. But they don't have power here, so when the power's here, then it's harder for them to take over.
Are terrorist
So
groups
true.
cleavage?
Yeah.
Okay. Like everything's cleavage.
Cleavage is the most common.
Okay.
Well, actually, no, this one's most common. Is discontent. So discontent takes the form of protests and riots usually. Protests are peaceful, riots are violent. So again, this is very similar to cleavage though, where it either results in more power to local governments to deal with local interests that are causing discontent. Like for example, if I want to sell my corn for more money, then the Ohio government is going to be the one.
No!
The Ohio government would help me.
Shut up.
Or if I'm
You're selling tea in Boston. No, Boston's in the U.S.
Get
If
out of the United
if I
States.
sell tea in the
the
United
UK.
Kingdom in 1776, and I'm mad that the colonists aren't paying my tea tax, then I'm gonna go, and then the government is gonna promote my interests by making the colonists pay the tea tax. You know,
Pow.
but
So true.
sometimes it results in more power to the federal government to deal with something on a national level. Like if it's a national problem, it's gonna be like a national addressing. But sometimes if it's violence, it's just to the federal government because violence is bad.
I want to hear
True.
the like the American Revolution from like the British's perspective.
It's
Oh.
gotta be so.
Like, that's
so.
gotta
Mr.
be
Muller
so
took a class
fun.
about that.
Really?
Yeah. Hey viewers, ask him about that. He'll be his favorite.
These
Another
might be
factor.
random people on the internet.
Supranational organizations. So supranational organizations are like the UN, NATO, and BRICS. So supranational organizations sometimes have like standards for how the power in their member nations is to be divided, and so because of that, that can cause change. So it usually results in more power to regional governments because that's just like it's like a more developed way of setting up a country. But sometimes it results in more power to the federal to meet the requirement, as well just based on the requirement. Finally, we have natural disaster. This is my favorite picture on the
I was gonna say.
besides the 9/11 one.
Oh my
It's an
god!
emergency.
You say that.
So, an emergency is usually just like a natural disaster. An emergency can truly be anything. If you think that it's urgent, then it's an emergency. I mean, me selling my corn for $4.50 instead of $5 could be an emergency, depending on who you ask. I guess some people really like my corn, but
Keep going.
so sometimes an emergency results in more power at the regional level to meet local needs. So like after Hurricane Katrina.
Stop giving United States
Oh my
examples.
god. Well, I live in the United States, so
Wow.
okay, you can't use any of these examples, but I'm gonna keep using them.
No, that's bad.
So like, let's say hypothetically there was a tsunami that hit London in the United Kingdom. Oh my god, that would never happen. But for the sake of this argument, it does. So either one of two things will happen. Either like the state that London is in will get more power to help address the needs of the citizens because sometimes the national government doesn't have the time or the consensus to agree on what to do in London. So sometimes London just gets to make its own decisions. But other times it's more power in the federal, especially if it's a more widespread disaster, to help address it more consistently. Because if there's more power in the federal government, it's like another thing where like it goes back to things happen quicker and things happen more consistently, and the federal government just has more resources because of the united front that it presents. Okay, this is like the last couple slides. So when the relationship between a federal government and a local government changes, there are two names for it. So a developed unitary system is when a country with a unitary system divides power to local governments, and that happened in the UK. So like the UK divides power between Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, and Wales.
But it's still a unitary.
But it's
system.
still the United Kingdom, and it's still a unitary system because at any point the federal government, the United Kingdom government, can take back that power, and there's nothing they can do about it because
There's no checks and balances.
there's nothing the local governments can do because it's not like it says anywhere that they legally have that power. The opposite is an asymmetric federal system, which is when a federal system absorbs the national government absorbs most of the power from the local governments, and that doesn't mean that the local governments are rendered like completely useless, but it is just when the federal government takes power or the national government takes power from the state governments, and that's happened in Russia, which half of why it's confusing. I don't have a thing that says ex-Russia on here, but
It's right there.
oh, it does say right there. So that's the thing. That's the confusing part, is that the United Kingdom is a unitary system. It's a developed unitary system, but it's still a unitary system. And Russia is a federal system. It's just asymmetric. Okay. MCQs. I had to change this one because it had all non-course countries. It was like Australia, Switzerland, United States, and something else.
Okay, edit.
Which of the following countries exemplifies a unitary system of government? Nigeria, China, Russia, and Mexico. I did put Russia on there to try to
I
trick.
have to burp.
A unitary system?
Mm-hmm.
Which one is he? Is that?
Is it Nigeria? No, Nigeria is a. It's not unitary. It's.
Okay, well, I'm kind of embarrassed you guys didn't get this that quick.
Sorry.
It's China.
Oh,
Well, those three are federal systems.
sorry guys.
What is the benefit of a unitary system?
It's
Efficient governance.
yeah. Yay.
Yeah.
Got a cookie.
Which system divides power between central government and regional governments?
Oh my god.
A federal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Parliamentary and federal can coexist, like how it doesn't in the United Kingdom. So forget I said that. But they can coexist. Parliamentary just means that there's a legislative body. A confederal system is when the states have power. That's how the Confederacy was, and that's why the Confederacy didn't work when they seceded. And a unitary system is literally the opposite of a federal system.
We need to do a
Fucking
case
dumbass.
study so we can pull examples
I
from
know.
an actual AP code.
I know.
Alright, so
I was.
What
What
God,
primarily
just make it
results in the
old
creation of a unitary system of government?
a unitary system?
Mm-hmm.
Centralization of power in the national government.
school.
Yeah.
They're all B.
Yeah, basically. So, the elimination of an executive branch would weaken the federal government because you're taking away a branch of government. Reduction in public participation, it doesn't necessarily result in a unitary system, because like Russia has reduced public participation because their elections aren't free and fair.
Mm-hmm.
But they're still a federal system. Like that doesn't have anything to do with a transition from unitary to federal. And division of power between central and regional governments is a federal system. So if a country did that, it'd be a federal system. That doesn't make any sense. Oh, this one's even small. How did the adoption of a federal system impact governance in countries like the United States? The correct answer is B because it's the definition of a federal system. And it says divided power between central and regional governments. The other ones I'll talk about, unitary systems, are just bullshit.
We don't know what the United States is, though.
The supporters of the federal system would most likely agree with which of the following arguments? The answer is C.
Oh.
C reads, power should be divided between a central government and local and regional governments. And again, that's literally the definition of a federal system.
No, you're voting.
I think this is the last
And
one.
memorize the countries. So
Which group would most likely argue that unitary system ensures efficient governance? The answer is D. This one's actually kind of hard. So a military junta, this one will confuse you because that's kind of what's happening in it's like the coup d'etat thing in Brooks' presentation. But all of those people they don't say anything about unitary versus federal.
Mm-hmm.
Like this is about the military. A theocrat is about religion. A federalist is about federalism. And a centralist is about like a central government. So this one, you have to really think literally. Like obviously it's not C. And just because military governments and theocracies tend to be unitary systems does not mean that someone who is a theocrat or is a military
would
junta
advocate for that.
means that they subscribe to a unitary system. It's a very important distinction you have to make because this will throw you off on the AP test. Which group is most likely to argue that a federal system promotes local autonomy? The correct answer is C.
Federalists.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. It's in the name. Use your brain. Yeah, that's it for me.
Okay, fire.